the 80-20 rule is 80% of jobs in the sports industry are within what we call the hidden job market. So that being people who work in the organizations, they're going to reach out to people who they know they can do a good job. And from their experiences that they know of, they're going to offer that job to them. And so that's why you don't see a lot of jobs enter the open job market, which is only where 20% of the jobs in the sports industry live. So from that alone, it just shows how important.
Like in one of our initial conversations, I mentioned to you that, we hadn't had anyone who was interested in pursuing a career in sports or entertainment. So today we've interviewed students interested in business, things like social justice, entrepreneurship, law, medicine, more of the sort of professional industries. And although many guests, have been interested and passionate about sports, you're our first guest who's gone that one step further and is, interested in pursuing an actual career in sports. So naturally, I wanted to start at the beginning and the foundation of your intended career, which is your passion for sports. So Michael, where exactly did that start for you? And what were some of your earliest sort of memories playing sports?
Yeah, so I guess I've always had an interest and a passion for sport. Ever since I was young, I played football growing up, did karate for quite a long period of time as well. And then all through, I guess, primary school and high school, tried a bunch of different sports as well. I was pretty lucky that I grew up in a sporting family. So both my parents are from South Africa. Cricket and rugby were pretty big sports for me growing up as well. So those were always on the telly, and sport was always really a part of my life, I guess. And yeah, just like my love for sport just comes from that competitive and the emotional roller coaster that you go on watching a game or playing a sport. Like, it's just amazing. That's why I love it so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all attest to that. The thrill of sports is there's not many things that really come close to it, eh? I mean, you mentioned that, sports has been, a lifelong passion and interest for you, but in preparing for the interview, I was sort of interested in, whether actually a career in sports specifically is something that, you've held for equally as long. Has that always been the ambition for you? Or was there a certain moment that sort of clicked in your head where it was like, hey, I can turn this passion into, something worthwhile in the long term?
Yeah, Matt, I think I was just like you. Like, growing up, I didn't think that a career in sports was possible. Like, I mean, yes, you always think that there's someone working for these sporting clubs that you watch on telly growing up, but you haven't never actually believed that, like, yes, this is something that I could turn into a career. And so, yeah, I didn't really think I could actually make sport, my passion for sport, a career. But I guess coming to the end of my uni degree, I was still undecided of what I wanted to do once I finished. The pathways that were kind of offered by the uni, I wasn't really connecting with too much. And so I turned to something that I thought that I'd be really passionate about, and that was sport. So I'm pretty lucky that I was able to, I guess, progress down that pathway, and I'm looking to turn that into a proper career.
Yeah, and you mentioned, some of the pathways that you took or you didn't take, to get to where you are now. And in an interview you did recently, with the sports bubble, I found it interesting how you were talking about, you made a distinction about, the traditional and the non-traditional pathways into sports. So just to start off with, for those of us, including myself, who are not really familiar with, how to get into sports and the conventional and non-conventional ways to get into sports, can you explain to us, what those different pathways were?
Yeah, so I guess from my experiences talking to a lot of sports professionals, sports management students, if you do a sports management or a sports science degree, there's always that opportunity to gain internship experience, I think, towards the back end of that degree with a professional sporting organization. And a lot of the time that ends up helping those students get a foot in the door and get noticed by sporting organizations that they can progress their career from that. From my perspective, I really had no pathway, I guess, coming from my commerce background. I didn't really know where to start or how to get my foot in the door. I was lucky though. I found an ad on Facebook for a company called Sportsgrad, who ran a podcast, and I started listening to that podcast, and they gave me some tips about how to find jobs, how to boost my image to potential employers. And gradually and surely, I've managed to work my way along that career path towards a sporting career.
So you mentioned there that you obviously pursued a commerce degree at USYD, as opposed to the more traditional approach, studying like a sports management degree at a university. So can you tell us just a bit about the commerce degree? Was it always a foregone conclusion for you to study commerce, or were you sort of tossing up and weighing up options, particularly the options which were, potentially more secure and the quote unquote safer options to get into sports?
Yeah, so I guess going back to high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do then. I had a passion, or not a passion, I guess an interest in law, but didn't get the ATAR high enough to do a law degree. A lot of my friends were going to study commerce, so I thought might as well jump on that bandwagon. Seems like a pretty good degree that could really lead you anywhere. And because I didn't really know where I was going, seemed like a pretty good option. Yeah, sports management really did seem like it was definitely an option, something that I could do. But like I said before, didn't really know if that was a viable path or yeah, what I want to do in the future. So I think commerce seemed like that better option that could really lead down any different road.
Yeah, and I mean, from the outside looking in, obviously, like most people looking to go into sports, do pursue that sports management degree. So looking back on your degree, I'm interested, like how do you feel that the skills and experiences you've learned through your degree really, do you think that really set you apart from everybody else trying to enter the sports industry?
Yeah, a little bit. It definitely does. With a commerce degree, you learn so many different skills that are transferable to a lot of different areas of work.
Yeah.
I mean, I did management as one of my majors, and so through that you learn how to work in teams, how to communicate, how to negotiate, those like basic I guess skills that you need in the workforce that could really take you anywhere, I guess. In terms of how this could set me apart to other sports management students, I guess just having that broad range of skills that you probably wouldn't get if you did a sports management degree, because with sports management, you're probably a bit more confined into the stuff that you learn and the skills that you develop. Through that commerce degree, I think, yeah, you really develop that really broad range of skills that could really take you anywhere.
Yeah, and one of the ways that you were able to broaden that skill set you had was to engage in like all those different extracurricular opportunities outside of your university degree. And as you said, your intention there was to become more well-rounded, more commercially aware, and I suppose more business savvy in general as well. In particular, you completed the USYD Graduate Edge program and the iLead Delegate program. So for those of us who don't know what exactly those programs are, can you just run us through the bare bones of those programs and why you decided to pursue those opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start off with the iLead program. So that one popped up through, I think, one of the university career emails. I'm not too sure if anyone really reads those emails, but yeah. I decided to click on one and found that opportunity. And it was an opportunity to go to the UK with a few other students from a bunch of different universities and just visit like some leading organizations. So I think we went to HSBC, Huawei, British Airways, as well as like the leading universities such as Cambridge and Oxford. Really cool experience. And just through going through that experience, the purpose of the program, I guess, was on leadership and developing leadership skills. I guess we had a few workshops with some of those professionals in those organizations about how they became successful and things that we could do as students to develop those skills. So yeah, that was a really, I guess, key purpose of going on that trip, was to develop those skills and also to go to the UK. I mean, like when else are you going to get that opportunity, and to learn from some leading organizations as well. And then with the Graduate Edge program, that was pretty similar to the iLead program, except it was held in Sydney. So we still went to some of the big organizations such as the big four consulting firms. We went to the LinkedIn offices, which was pretty cool. And yeah, similar experience. We did a bunch of workshops and networked with a bunch of professionals in that professional industry. And so, yeah, it was really great experience to be able to develop those skills of communication and networking as well, which are pretty important.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting to hear you talk about, you know, the broad nature of those experiences you had in those programs. And, you know, when you compare that to the more conventional pathway into sports, to the sports management degree, like I was doing just a little bit of research into, you know, like what it is, just to familiarize myself with it. And like it goes without saying, it's primarily about, you know, studying the business side of sport. It's about, you know, building skills, creating networks, gaining knowledge, like the same things that you were doing in those programs, but it was in the confines of the sporting context, the sporting landscape. So it's quite interesting to me to hear you talk about, you know, the broad nature of the experiences you had, you know, pursuing that commerce degree. And, you know, as you mentioned yourself, you know, in some ways, you know, that does set you apart from, you know, everyone else trying to enter that highly competitive industry, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those networking skills are fundamental. Like they're going to help you for, I guess, when you go for other roles as well. They're like people that you meet, you never know how they're going to help you in the future. So I guess being able to gain those experiences are pretty invaluable as a student, especially.
100%. Like we touched on the sports bubble interview earlier. You also, in that interview, you also talked about, you know, some of the uncertainties and, you know, reservations you had entering the sports industry, you know, particularly about not knowing where exactly to start and how to get your foot in the door, as you've alluded to already. But on a more sort of general point, like on the concept of, you know, misconceptions, do you think that, you know, that mindset is quite common for students who are trying to, you know, get their foot in the door in the sports industry? Is that something you experienced yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like if you're not coming from a sports management degree, it seems pretty invisible. Like opportunities to work in the sports industry, they don't get advertised that often.
Right.
And this is just a lot of the stuff I've learned about the sports industry and entering the sports industry has come from sports grads. So all of these things I owe to them for being able to learn so much about it. So one of the things that sports grads taught me is that the 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule is 80% of jobs in the sports industry are within what we call the hidden job market. So that being people who work in the organizations, they're going to reach out to people who they know they can do a good job. And from their experiences that they know of, they're going to offer that job to them. And so that's why you don't see a lot of jobs enter the open job market, which is only where 20% of the jobs in the sports industry live. So from that alone, it just shows how important networking is. And yeah, that's pretty much one of the ways to get into the sports industry is purely by networking alone. Now, for a student, it might seem like, okay, how do I make those connections if I don't have that experience? Another thing I've learned is that, yes, it might not seem that there are many opportunities available in a professional sphere, but there are plenty of opportunities available in something called grassroots sports. So your local sports club, your local footy club, they have all the positions that are available in a professional sports team. You can do the same thing at a grassroots sports job, grassroots sports club. So something like budgeting or data analysis or media and social media. All these jobs are available within grassroots sport, and that's where you can get your foot in the door in the sports industry by taking up those roles. And soon enough, piece by piece, you'll end up making your way into a lot of different circles and eventually making your way into the professional sphere. So that's a couple of things I've learned from sports grad and yeah, the different pathways into getting into the sports industry that might not seem as visible.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear you talk about that 80-20 principle. And, you know, doing a few of these conversations with people who are pursuing the more like, quote unquote professional industries, like the sort of like archetypal or conventional professional industries like law, business, medicine, whatever. those grassroots opportunities, don't really exist in those fields. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about, how young university students can actually, create those opportunities at a local sort of grassroots level, as you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Like coming from a commerce background, you see those
Mm,
like regular intakes for summer internships, vacational roles,
exactly.
graduate
Big
positions.
four.
So, yeah, doing those, going through that big interview process, that big application process. With sport, it's quite different because those intakes aren't as available, and so you got to create those
Mm,
opportunities yourselves in
yeah.
order to get in the door.
100%. And we'll definitely touch on a couple of those grassroots positions you've undertaken as well. You're not just all talk, you've actually done the grassroots work yourself. Um, but on the point of misconceptions, as I told you, prior to the interview starting, that I was telling a friend the other day, I'm looking to interview someone, this guy called Michael, interested in a career in sports. And as I told you earlier, the first response was, "Oh, okay. So, what type of professional athlete is he?" And it got me thinking. Is that sort of a misunderstanding that people have? The idea that there's this narrow, defined class of opportunities in sports. And you actually mentioned it earlier when you sort of touched on like the visible nature of sport, like you see the end product, you see the players on the field on a Sunday afternoon at Leichhardt Oval or whatever, but you don't see like all the stuff that goes behind the scenes, which is not necessarily visible. So in your own experience, did you sort of have that, I don't want to say narrow, but yeah, I suppose like a narrow understanding of the opportunities available in sports?
Um, I don't think I don't really know if I had a bit of a conception of what a job in sport looked like.
Mm,
Of course, like I had an idea that yes, there must be some backroom staff that
yeah.
are involved with the team. But yeah, once I had got some opportunities that we'll touch on later, I didn't actually realize like the amount of different roles there are in a sporting organization.
Mm,
Um, and I kind of realized that yes, it might seem like a sports organization, but it's just like another business. Like they all have their same kind of departments that a regular, I guess, corporate business would have. Like you got your main four functions in finance, human resources, ops, marketing. You got all your key functions. It's just a little bit different. So yes, it's similar to a normal business in the way it operates, but it's quite different in the nature of the work and um, yeah, it's just it's
yeah.
different, but it's also kind of similar.
Yeah, those sort of core principles apply. I mean, sports organizations are businesses at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess they're in the business of making money. Um, yeah, I guess that's their core function. Um, I mean, you touched on some of the resources that you've tapped into to get your career in sports up and running. Um, for example, by listening to those sports grad podcasts. But just to sort of wrap up this section on of cracking into the industry, what sort of broader tips, advice, and guidance would you give to like a young student, maybe in the first couple of years of a sports management degree or a commerce degree, who's looking to get that first experience in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I've got a couple tips. So first one I've already mentioned is get involved with grassroots sport.
Yeah.
That's a way of getting involved in a sport organization, albeit at the amateur level, but you still get
Mm,
an idea of how a sporting club would operate, and also gaining those key experiences that are going to be valuable to any employer, especially in the sporting industry. If you've already know how one operates and the basic functions of one, you're going to be miles ahead when you're going to apply for a job there. Second one would probably be the second one has kind of got two parts to it. So it would be definitely networking. So, like I said before, 80% of jobs in the sports industry in the hidden job market, and that just comes through networking. So knowing people, and that's the way you're going to get your foot in the door there. A way of building that network up, I'd say, is also listening to podcasts. So there's so many podcasts out there about careers in sport, and listening to people already in the sports industry and how they've got to the position they're in and some of the tips they can offer as well, like yourself running your own podcast and the kind of guests that you have on and the tips that they can give. and also using LinkedIn as well. So LinkedIn to build that network, yeah, is a great way of connecting with professionals and building that network. One of the things that I did to to build that network through LinkedIn is I've listened to a podcast. That podcast might have a guest, a professional in the sporting industry. After I listened to that podcast, I'd look them up on LinkedIn, send them a message, say, really liked what you heard. And that's a way of making a connection and kicking your network off like that. I think, yeah, when I started using LinkedIn like that, I only had like about 300 connections. And at the moment, I think I've got around 800 connections just through doing that. So it
Yeah.
pays off. That's a good tip I can give to some young students out there looking to get their foot in the door.
All right. So, Michael, to date, you've had several sports related roles, which we've touched on earlier, where you've been able to firstly kickstart and then progress your career in the industry. So apart from the roles at large professional sporting organizations, you've also had some university roles, whether it be as on the subcommittee of the sports part of the USYD Business Society. That was way too long, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But you've also had sort of positions at professional Australian sporting organizations. We've touched on the West Tigers, Cricket New South Wales, and your current internship role at CSM Sports and Entertainment. So, Michael, just to begin with, can you tell us about some of those experiences you've had? What are some of the roles you've had, and how did they come across your lap?
Yeah. So unlike what I've mentioned already in this podcast, I didn't actually have a lot of experience with grassroots sports organizations, just simply because I didn't really know how to get involved or what I wanted to do when I was going through high school and through the first stages of uni. And so when it came to the end of my degree, I was kind of left in a bit of a hole, not having that initial experience. So in that sense, I was quite lucky in the way that these roles came about, being that they appeared on a job board and I applied for it. Simple as that. I mean,
You
they
need some
don't come
luck,
around too often. Yeah, sorry, what was that?
So I was just saying you need some luck, bit of luck here and there, eh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I couldn't believe when I saw them pop up. I was like, gotta get these opportunities because they're gonna be invaluable.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are how I ended up getting all three roles that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And I suppose, like, I wanted to dig into a couple of those roles in particular. But before I do, like I mentioned to you before we started the interview, like, did working for some of those large sporting organizations, some of the biggest in Australia, whether it be West Tigers or Cricket New South Wales, like, what did you learn about, the way those large sporting organizations work? Like, was there any sort of insights, like really cool insights you had, or anything surprising?
Yeah, so the two that I've worked for, Cricket New South Wales, West Tigers,
Yeah.
they're two very different organisations. So Cricket New South Wales, I'd say they're quite a flat organisation. So there's a
Right.
lot of positions that are casual, part-time, and then as you move up in terms of those high level positions, they're not all too common. So they're quite there's a lot of, I guess, casual positions that they have within their organisation at Cricket New South Wales. And then with West Tigers, they're a lot more different. So they're quite a lean organization. So they don't employ a lot of staff, but the amount of work that they have to get done is done by a small group of people. So it's a lot of work for a small group of people. And yeah, it's just a really well-run ship at the West Tigers in terms of the amount of work that needs to get done and
Yeah.
how it gets done, and the amount, like, there's different departments and they all cross over. Like the work isn't set within your one department at the Tigers especially. But yeah, I guess I've found it both those sports organizations, just the culture there. Like, I guess from the outside you might think that, oh, it's a really exclusive club that only a small group of people are a part of and everyone must be really serious and super mean. But once you get in the organizations, everyone's super nice, super friendly. Like, first day on the job at the Tigers, I walked in, I was super nervous, and like everyone just said hi to you and made you really feel welcome. So from what I've heard from other experiences as well, like, that's a big part of the sports industry, and that everyone's really welcoming and really nice.
Yeah, that's always a bonus, hey. And I think, everyone shares that reservation and concern over starting new roles, particularly at, large businesses. But it's refreshing to hear, your positive experiences starting in a large organization. Michael, you mentioned there that, the work you did at West Tigers specifically, it crossed over into different departments. So for those that don't know, you're currently a membership servicing intern. You're still in the role, right?
Yeah, so almost finished that role. That's I
Yeah.
think due to end at the end of August, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in that position, like, did you find yourself working, with different departments and learning, about different parts of the like the West Tigers organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of an intern, of course, like you're going to have experiences with different
Yeah.
departments to see what kind of areas of sport you like working in and the like. So as a membership intern, primarily, a lot of my work involved phone calls and emails to members to renew their membership, or to fans who weren't members to purchase a membership. So it involved a lot of telecommunications there. That was especially in the preseason. And then during the season, it was more about reminding members to renew their tickets, just simply because of COVID restrictions, and ensuring that they're able to get a ticket to the game. So it's a lot of, I guess, interacting with members and ensuring that they're having a good time with their membership. As the season progressed, I guess I had chances to move around. So
Mm.
I think on game days, I was involved with the community team. We did a bit of raffle promotions and um, yeah, stuff for the West Tigers Foundation.
Yeah.
Um, I had opportunity, I guess, to have a go at merchandising, so that involved like getting the jerseys ready for some of the players for some of the games. Had a go at sponsorship, so just having a look at how the sponsorship team works, and just shadowing that department for a day. So yeah, you get to dip your hands into a lot of different buckets over there as an intern.
Yeah, it sounds to me that you were, heavily interacting with members in the community, like whether it be fans, other staff members, or whatever the case may be. And it's interesting to compare that to, a different type of community engagement you did with Cricket New South Wales, which you worked as a community cricket officer. And for those that don't know, part of your role was to deliver cricket programs to kids in schools and sports clubs. So it's essentially the same principle, engaging with the community. From the outside looking in, I imagine it's all about, encouraging enthusiasm in sport, which is something you mentioned before we started the interview. Basically about promoting the sport and basically just letting kids like have fun and enjoy the sport. And obviously, you were involved at that foundational grassroots level. So, we were talking off air a little bit about, what it's been like working at that grassroots level. Like, has it changed the way you look at sport at all? Has it rekindled or reignited your passion for sport, or has it changed the way you perceive the industry in any way?
Yeah, so I guess with these school programs that I've been
Mm.
doing at Cricket New South Wales, they didn't exist when I was a kid. When I was in school, yeah, we didn't really have that opportunity to learn those skills, or yeah, gain an understanding of the game as they are now. Like these programs in schools, they're designed to get kids involved, not so much as to become a professional cricket player, but more so fun gamified versions of cricket that will make kids want to keep active and want to keep involved with maybe not cricket but any sport as well. Um, so yeah, that's really a thing that I've found has been a bit different from, I guess, my perception of a community officer when I was younger. In that, yeah, it's a lot more of just getting kids involved, getting kids active, and helping them have a lot of fun with the game. Can I just say, like, not many people get the opportunity to be paid to play cricket and run activities with kids. Like,
The fun,
it's a pretty cool
this,
gig. So.
yeah, I can't imagine, to be honest. And like you mentioned there, like something I didn't think about was like you hit the nail on the head there when you said like it's not about making the next Steve Smith or David Warner or Dennis Lilly or whatever. It's about it's the broader social benefits, and I think there's a lot of like social and economic benefits of getting kids into sports, specifically. So just thought I had, and yeah, that definitely changed my understanding of grassroots sports. And like we were talking like off air about how it's funny how like all those professional athletes, when they get into hot water, the first thing they do is go back to grassroots, take a few pictures with the kids. Like obviously they're giving back, but it's just funny to see. And we were also talking about how the successful sporting organizations in Australia, invest a lot of money into those grassroots organizations. And you compare that to some of the other sports organizations like rugby union, who, don't necessarily invest that money. And then you see, the sort of situation they're in now. Yeah, so that's quite interesting, and something we were talking about earlier as well, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of a recent thing the last, I guess, 5 or so years, in that a lot of national sporting organizations are really investing in these grassroots programs like cricket, Woolworths Cricket Blast, that got a revamp. About 5 years ago, or
Yeah.
only a couple of years ago. AFL is Auskick, that's been going on for quite a while, and that's been really successful. Football Australia has been really investing into grassroots programs as well, and so I guess rugby union's been a bit left on the side a bit, in that they haven't really invested as much in the grassroots aspect, and I think that's why the this might be a bit controversial, but like the state of the game at the moment isn't great, and so I think that's an area in which they've missed out, especially in Western Sydney, where there's such a large pool of talent for rugby Australia, and they just haven't invested as much in the past in terms of building those players, and right from when they were younger, and keeping them in the game as well. So maybe that's something that they could look into, because of how successful it's been for other national sporting organizations.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't think it's controversial at all. I think they're in a bit of strife now. But like logically, if these sporting organizations are, putting a lot of money to those grassroots opportunities, particularly for those flat organizations like you mentioned, that's going to produce a lot of opportunities for young university students who are looking to get their foot in the door. And you mentioned, particularly in your experience at Cricket in New South Wales, there's a lot of casual opportunities. So, that's really, I think that's a really valuable for, other young students out there who are trying to really get their foot in the door in that respect. So, Michael, you're currently working at the West Tigers, but you also recently started an intern role at CSM Sports and Entertainment. You started that in July, is that right? Around there?
Yeah, literally at the start of the lockdown, I was really lucky to be able to still get an internship. So yeah, super happy about that.
You were working remotely, right?
Yeah, it's all been remote since I started, which is a bit unfortunate, but yeah, really grateful for the opportunity to still be able to work whilst in lockdown.
I mean, on the flip side, like I've been in my job for a few months, and as soon as you went into lockdown, like they didn't have capacity to do remote work for our position. So, I haven't been working for the past couple of months. So yeah, you should definitely
there's different aspects to it, hey?
Yeah. So, I mean, for those of us that don't know, including myself, just run us through what you do at CSM Sports Entertainment. What do they do, and what do you do as an intern?
Yeah, sure. So CSM Sport and Entertainment is a sports agency. So a lot of people might not know what a sports agency looks like or what they do. There's actually quite a few that exist. It's just that, like I said before, they don't advertise their roles, and they don't have a yearly intake in terms of graduates and whatnot. So they only really take on people if and when they need them. And so I guess in my role, and what a sports agency would do, is that they work with a lot of major events and some sporting organizations in being able to produce, I guess, a sporting product. So competitions, sponsorships and brands, being able to market those. It's really how sports organizations, they fit into the picture. So in my role, I've been, one of the main projects I've been working on is an event called Spring Cycle, which is with Bicycle New South Wales as well. And the idea of that was, it's kind of like the City to Surf, except it's all on bikes. So it's a way of getting families involved with cycling, also the chance to cycle over the Harbour Bridge, which is not something that people get to do very often, which is
Yeah.
a great part of spring cycle. Unfortunately,
Mm.
COVID's really meant that that's had to be adapted into different aspects, and so we're still working on putting that together.
Mm.
I'm not really sure how much I can speak about the work that I've been doing with
No,
CSM,
of
just because not
course.
all of it's finalized, but
Yeah.
I've had the chance to, I guess, work with a couple big brands and sporting organizations, such as the All Blacks and Cricket New South Wales as well, in terms of from an agency's perspective. So yeah, you still get
Mm.
that opportunity to really work with those big brands and sporting organizations, and it's something that isn't really known too well. Like sporting agencies aren't really a career path that many people know about. So yeah, it's a really cool
Exactly.
opportunity.
Yeah, and I think one of the themes running throughout this conversation is, I just suppose, the availability and accessibility of those opportunities in sport. You mentioned that you need a bit of luck. You've also mentioned that a lot of these jobs are internally promoted, not necessarily published on Seek or Indeed or whatever the case may be. So it's really cool to see that, to hear that insight, and I think that's really valuable for other aspiring young professionals looking to work in the sports industry. Um, you mentioned that like a lot of these sporting organizations or agencies don't have defined graduate opportunities or even like internship intake programs or whatever you call them, like the big four in finance and commerce. So I just wanted to ask you there, Michael, like what would be your tips and advice for students who are looking to sort of secure an internship or a grad role? You've touched on it a few times throughout the interview, but what would be some pieces of advice that you give to those aspiring students?
Yeah, so I guess I'm also in a similar position. I haven't secured a full-time paid gig with the sports organization yet, so I'm still hunting around for that. But I
Mm.
guess a way of getting ahead of the pack is really trying to find those intern opportunities or even creating opportunities yourself. And once you
Mm.
have found those opportunities, like we mentioned earlier with Grassroots Sports, really putting that out there. So a good way of doing that is through LinkedIn. So I guess a way that I've been doing that, and the way that I've, I guess, been growing my image, is by posting on LinkedIn regularly. Because yes, you may apply for a position, but that's one resume going to one employer.
Right.
What you're doing with LinkedIn, if you're posting regularly, is that you're making one post, but heaps of people could see that, like even outside of your network. So whilst I may have, like, one of my posts I put out, I might have only about 500 people in my network at that time, it got 3,000 views. So like people outside of your network are seeing those things, and you're putting your experience out to a wider range of potential employers that might see it and say, that person's taken initiative, they might be a really good fit for our organization. And that's how you get those networks built and enter the hidden job market, which is,
Yeah.
I guess,
And
a
even,
bit of
yeah.
advice for your students out there.
Yeah, and even beyond, even beyond future employers being your audience in LinkedIn, like you come across people like me, I looked at one of your LinkedIn posts and that's how we connected and, started this interview. So it just goes to
Exactly,
show
absolutely.
it just goes to show you the benefits of putting yourself out there. And obviously, that comes with its own insecurities, vulnerabilities, which we all have. But it's refreshing to hear, some of the opportunities that you've come across just by putting yourself out there on LinkedIn. And speaking of putting yourself out there and creating opportunities, that was a great segue. You've also started your own multimedia sports platform, which I mentioned at the top of the interview, called the Debutant Report. So I'm really excited to talk about that. I think it's really interesting, and one of the things that caught my eye when I came across you on LinkedIn. So just to give a bit of context, you initially started the project by writing sports blogs, reporting on sporting headlines in Australia, whether it be rugby union, league, soccer, cricket. And I was reading through the articles earlier today, and firstly, I was very impressed with the quality of the writing. It was great.
Thanks,
But
mate.
to me, like obviously a big part of those articles is conveying sort of factual information, right? What was the score, who won, like who made the plays, who effed up in the final minutes, or whatever the case may be, right? But what I found particularly interesting with your articles was that you also had your own analysis weaved into the article as well, which I found really interesting. Like one of the articles I was reading, I think it was one of the Wallabies and France games. You were talking about like one of the controversial moments where I think it was Korobidi who got red carded for like a high tackle, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that's a factual piece of information. But you went on to provide your own analysis, and you were talking about how inconsistent refereeing decisions like that has broader implications for the game. Specifically, you talked about how it drives away or could drive away potential fans, and could stunt the growth of the sport in Australia, but also globally. So that analysis was really appealing to me throughout your sports blogs. So I'm interested, Michael, like what made you get into initially writing sports blogs and getting the Debutant Report up and running?
Yeah, so I guess I started the Debutant Report simply because, a couple of reasons actually. So, number one, I've always had an interest in media, and I guess sport as well. But like I said before, those kind of opportunities to make that a career don't come around too often in terms of a professional space. So starting one on my own is probably a good way of getting my foot in the door and just putting stuff out there that might show potential employers kind of things I can do. And I guess the second part is that a lot of my friends got sick and tired of me just like talking a lot about sport and entertainment and just going on and providing my own opinions on it. So I guess putting it out into a blog is probably the more efficient way of doing it without angering too many people.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's funny. That's really funny. Like you mentioned there that part of the reason you started was to show your talents and skills to future employers. And like before the interview, I was speculating about why has Michael started this sports blog? Like what could have motivated him? And it got me thinking about why I started this platform as well. And part of the reason for me was to provide a portfolio, right? To show employers and whoever else that may be watching, hey, this is what I'm capable of. I have these skills, these attributes, these characteristics. You can't like, but for this creating this platform, you can't really communicate that to those types of people. And it's interesting to hear you talk about how that was also part of your motivation about showcasing your writing ability, your journalistic intuition, your level of analysis and sporting opinion. So like, was that a big part of it for you to sort of provide a portfolio for people to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that was a byproduct as well. I think at the start, it was more so out of enjoyment and just being able to put my ideas out there, which I was really interested about, and getting my, I guess, ideas out there rather than having to speak to a brick wall in terms of the people who want to listen. But yeah, it's turned out to be something that, as I posted on LinkedIn, some other professionals have found really interesting. And so I guess it's turned into that kind of portfolio aspect as well.
And it created opportunities for yourself, right? Like you had a podcast interview with the Sports Bubble, and obviously this podcast interview. So it's sort of a flow-on effect in that respect. Hey,
yeah, it's a small snowball right now, but let's see where it goes if we keep pushing.
It's downhill. It's going downhill, man. It's gaining momentum.
Yeah.
But like in one of your LinkedIn posts, you talked about the initial hesitancy and uncertainty of creating the sports bubble, and I think a lot of people out there, particularly young people, can attest to that uncertainty, whether it's going to work for a big corporation, starting university, or starting their own independent venture like you have done. Like, so just looking back on that experience, Michael, like I know it's a bit cliche to ask, but like how did you, like what helped you navigate the uncertainty? That's my question. What helped you really get through that?
Creating it, or
uncertainty of creating it, and particularly you said the uncertainty of making your articles public, right? That was
yeah. So I guess one of the challenges and I've found with it is I guess the kind of public backlash or like the public comments that you could get from posting your
Mm.
opinions and what people might think. Like after like a big sporting match, you always read through the Facebook comments, and like
Yeah.
Facebook comments can be like vicious, man. So like I was always a bit
Hostile.
hesitant and a bit uncertain whether to go ahead with writing these articles. But then I just realized like it's all in your own head. Like it's all a matter of confidence. And if you think that your ideas are sound and justified and you think they're worth putting out there, then go ahead with it. Like I had those, I guess, doubts about whether I should put these things out. But then, yeah, I just realized like, what's the worst that could happen? You know, it's like
Yeah.
you end up growing thicker skin eventually. And like, thankfully, I haven't like received any negative comments so far. So it
I was
seems to be
gonna
going well
say,
for me, I guess. But
yeah.
yeah, there's just, I guess, some of the reservations or a bit of uncertainty I had about initially posting it. But
Mm.
yeah, it's going along pretty well now.
Yeah, you mentioned it right there. Like it's all in your own head, you're all in your own head, right? And you mentioned there that in the end you didn't receive like 1,000 hate mails saying, Michael, your take on the last game was just total rubbish, right? So I think that's a universal struggle for most, including myself.
Mm.
So during I suppose the second lockdown in Sydney, you were able to sort of, actually you might have done it before, but you were able to turn and transition your sports blog into a podcast as well, and sort of expand the scope of your project. And in one of your LinkedIn posts, you were talking about, the opportunities that, the lockdown, has given you, to give you more free time to start working on, passion projects essentially. And so, we were talking a bit, earlier in the interview and off air about, potentially, young people out there, might not realize that they have a lot of opportunity to create, during the lockdown. So was that something that really resonated with you? And was that something that you really promote to other young people out there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, I always had an interest and passion for, I guess, media and journalism.
Yeah.
But writing articles is just one method. It's just one medium. Like there's always other mediums you can always go into. And with this lockdown, especially, it gave me more time to really go and invest into potential avenues in which I could expand the Debutant Report. So yeah, starting a podcast was, I guess, the next step. And there are always other ideas of how to expand further in terms of growing the Debutant Report in the future. Also because I guess it's just starting a podcast is a different way of getting a message across. Like it's all, I found like writing sports articles is a really good way of writing and articulating your ideas that way through blog posts, but being able to speak on a podcast and articulate your ideas that way is, I guess, it's definitely a different way of doing it. Not only with sports, but I've always had, I guess, an interest in entertainment and reality TV. So starting a podcast is, I guess, a way of being able to talk more about that kind of stuff where you need to go a bit more into detail in terms of what's going on in that analysis. And I found a podcast is really a better way of getting my opinions out there rather than writing them down in terms of that entertainment reality TV aspect. But yeah.
Yeah, and
one of
those reality TV shows that's clearly of interest to you is Survivor, right? And you've been doing podcast episodes about that. So, like, what can for listeners of the Debutant Report podcast, what can they expect in the future? Are you going to mostly focus on entertainment, a bit of entertainment and sports? Where do you see the Debutant Report going in the future?
Yeah, in terms of the podcast, and talking about Survival, like, I find it really enjoyable, being able to go really in depth into that kind of analysis there. So, yeah, the podcast is gonna have, I guess, a bit of I guess the podcast is gonna have quite a bit of Survivor content and reality TV content, just because it's an easier way of projecting my ideas. There's always ideas in the future to grow that podcast even more. So I've got maybe a few interviews prepared, lined up potentially in the future with some special guests. So that could be an interesting way to go down. I've had some of my friends ask me whether they can come on and talk about some sporting games that they're pretty interested in. So yeah, there's always different avenues you can go by. One great thing about the Debutant Report is that it's not fixed. So you can really do anything with it. Like if I wanted to talk about some random concert that hopefully people can go to in the future, like I could write about it, I could talk about it. Like it's really open to anything. So yeah, yeah, that's the great thing about the Debutant Report. I can really go
Yeah.
down different avenues and dive into different things.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't imagine, recording a podcast about Survivor is like a chore or a hassle for you. Like, as you said, it's whatever you make of it. And like, I guess on a broader point, that's something that, other people out there, can definitely take on board as well is, um, to create opportunities that, reflect your passions and interests. Because, it's more likely to work out in the long term if it's not a chore and a hassle.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're talking about something that you love, like it's not going to feel like you're doing this specifically for your career. You're actually going to have fun with it and it's going to feel more like a hobby than anything.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose on the flip side of things, Michael, just to end on, because I am conscious of the time, like we talked off air about how, well, I'll let you explain it, but you talked about some of the challenges you've had starting the Debutant Report. So can you tell us about, some of the obstacles you've encountered along the way? How have you overcame them and some of the solutions you've created?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, obviously starting a podcast, it comes with its fair share of technical difficulties and little bits of technology that you kind of need to learn and figure out. So yeah, definitely getting those um learning how to use software for editing and for recording. That's
Yeah.
was an initial challenge getting that started up. Um and yeah, just like making it seem professional. Like if you're starting something out, you don't really want it to come across as something that's just made just for fun. Like, especially if it's going to be posted on LinkedIn, you want it to be looking professional and clean and everything like that. So in terms of graphics, in terms of sound quality, um, just making it seem professional is probably one of the challenges that I've found. And
Mm.
yeah, it's been, I guess, a lot of learning and a lot of just tinkering around with stuff to make it, um, yeah, just like look as best as it can.
Yeah. So Michael, that pretty much brings us to the end of our interview. That's flown by, to be honest. It's almost an hour. I just want to
Great chat.
say, yeah, I mean, like looking back on the interview, there are a few key things that really stand out to me. And I think, as I was saying to you in a little break we had, it's clear to me that you're really speaking from experience. And I think sharing your experiences, sharing people's experiences is something that I try to reflect in these conversations. And as I mentioned at the top of the episode, we haven't had anyone from a sports or entertainment background. So I was really interested in reflecting that and having that represented on this platform. And I'm glad that we were able to connect, Michael, because I think some of those insights you've given are, like, honestly, if I was pursuing a career in sports, this would be something that I definitely want to listen to, particularly about the lack of visibility around the opportunities in sports. I found the insights into grassroots sports and the opportunities for students there particularly interesting. And I think something that a theme that sort of run throughout the conversation is how you've been able to sort of cultivate and create opportunities for yourself when you weren't given opportunities. I think that's a really good thing to have, a good mindset to have, and I think that's particularly helpful and instructive for other young people, even if they're not interested in pursuing sports or anything like that or entertainment. That's something that I try to adopt myself, and I think that's something that's really valuable for other students as well. So Michael, in closing, thank you for your time, and I appreciate you joining the conversation.
Yeah, no worries, Sid. Thanks for having me. And just, yeah, looking back at like what I've said about getting a start in the sports industry, yes, it's hard. It didn't
Mm.
come easy for me. And I guess putting yourself out there and trying to increase your image as much as you can is probably the best advice I can probably give students looking to get their foot in the door in the sports industry. Just trying to get involved and everything will flow on from there.